Hello everyone! You guys seem to really enjoy the 10 changes I wanted for Splatoon 4, so today I want to do a different idea. 5 brand new ideas to consider for the game, some suggested by other people. And I want to go over these ideas to see if there's something I really would want to see for Splatoon 4 or not. These kind of videos are really fun, so let me know what speculative content you guys would like to see for Splatoon 4 in the comments below, and let's get started. One thing that's noteworthy for Splatoon 4 is that it's going to be on the next Switch, meaning the console itself is going to be more powerful, potentially allowing for options that they couldn't do previously. Something Sendu thought I should talk about is what if the game moved from a 4v4 to a 5v5, since that would be an option, and 5v5 is pretty popular for team shooters, unless your name is Overwatch right now. 5v5 for Splatoon is a pretty interesting topic though. I think there is one big, more competitive issue that it solves quite a bit. The need for a special like armor or tacticooler is currently one of your 4 specials. With 5 people, it's one of your 5 specials. Not the most ideal fix for it, but it does mean that you have more freedom in the specials you want to stack. And in general, the benefit with 5v5 is more team play. With more players on the map, there's a higher chance for coordination, a better chance for players to be able to work together, and much more combinations of things you'd be able to try. Even the maps would likely be improved for a 5v5 format, since you would need a little bit more space for all the players involved. However, it has some downsides too. It's going to be more technically demanding to have another player on each team, as well as it could be harder to solo carry as an individual. If you need to clutch up, going against 5 people instead of 4 is really difficult. The most important factor though is how overstimulating Splatoon 3 can be. I just compared it to a lot of other team-based shooters when starting out, but Splatoon 3 moves way faster than pretty much all of them, and has a lot more going on with shorter games total. Adding an extra player to the mix to something that already has so much to keep track of could make the game more difficult, especially for beginners. Honestly, I'm not sure if 5v5 is worth it. There's a lot of upsides and downsides here, and while I do think 5v5 could lead to more interesting play, it has a lot of problems that would need to be worked around. And I think something to learn from Overwatch, even though this game isn't as role-based as this, is that some weapons may need to be adjusted to fit the format of having another player on the screen, which is gonna be a difficult thing to work around. To me, I don't think 5v5 is something they need to do, but if they have the time, ideas, and willingness to change things to make it work, it could be something that's interesting. But I wouldn't necessarily call it a hope of mine. Number 2 was inspired from a tweet I saw from Octa saying, "Might be a hot take, but I'd rather have Splatoon be a live service game with microtransactions for story modes or weapon skins rather than be stuck with content drought for years between releases." Now, in my previous Splatoon 4 video, I mentioned that I wanted the ideal Splatoon lifespan to be longer. And well, one thing noteworthy about that is they need a reason to keep players on for longer. They already got your money, and Nintendo Switch Online isn't exactly making the big bucks or a Splatoon exclusive thing. Really, the single-player DLC is the most notable thing they can do in terms of making money later in a Splatoon's lifespan. Live service does have some positives here. If it's done well, the monetization could be kept to purely optional stuff while allowing most of the game to be accessible. Purchases kept to stuff like skins purely for customization would be awesome. But also, we live in the real world, let's be honest guys, and Nintendo is not immune from scummy practices. Insert image of $40 Diddy Kong here. If done right, a live service version of this game would be more accessible since pretty much anyone could try it out for free. It could allow the game to go on longer, add more customization, and possibly be a better form of monetization. But that's if it's done right. Splatoon 3 indicates there's interest in it, considering they have the whole seasonal model and battle pass idea, but right now it's just kind of in the middle. It's an experience system to keep people playing the game for a reward because it's something they need, otherwise people won't be able to find matches. The catalog we have right now might not have money attached to it, but it's clear that it's there to incentivize players to keep playing the game and keep the player base active. Like with 5v5, if this was done properly, I'd be okay with it. It really depends how the monetization works, but in this case, I have a lot less faith for a live service being done well, so I'd rather just have the game have a little bit more forms of paid DLC. I'm not sure what that would be, but I think having it be so that only a few things cost money and most of it is free with a $60 game is probably safer. We'll see what they do though. Next up, my simplest idea to talk about, a stage builder. The only real downside is that this would probably take a lot of development time in a game that already is going to have a lot of different modes if Splatoon 3 is anything to indicate. But a stage builder could be huge, considering how many issues the game has with stage design. Giving players the options to make their own could alleviate a lot of the pressure there, as well as give players the ability to make more stages they enjoy. On top of that, if there is a good sharing system, it's possible that a stage builder could drastically extend the lifespan of a game, as well as just give new players something to do. I know there's going to be certain people who would be very interested in making stages as their main way of enjoying Splatoon. The insane upsides of a stage builder might just be worth the time though. Out of any of the features we're talking about today, this is probably the one I want the most. Number 4. This comes from Ollie, who talks a little bit about design redundancy. Basically, this talks about main weapons and special weapons and the idea of having many more similar options. For example, when you have stuff like Kraken, Reeve Slider, and Ultra Stamp, you're a bit more limited in how you can balance them because a lot of them serve similar purposes, and you can't overstep boundaries on each other. This is possibly even more detrimental to main weapons. For example, GooTuber and Squiffer are very similar, so the changes you can do to one without overstepping on the other are more limited. There are some balance changes you could do to separate weapons' identities more, and that's something we've seen throughout the years. Splash and Zap were actually very similar before Splash got its perfect jump RNG, for instance. And with Splatoon 3 now having so many weapons with obviously more coming in Splatoon 4, the idea of potentially cutting back that roster is something that people think about. In my opinion though, I don't think this should be done too much. I'm more okay with it in terms of specials because it would also improve the quality of things. But for main weapons, I don't think there's many that could be scrapped. If anything, what I'd like to see is some concepts being merged. GooTuber and Squiffer is one I talked about, but for another example, Luna and S-Blast could be an interesting one to combine. What if the short-range mode just was Luna and the long-range mode was that of S-Blast? That could be an interesting way to buff Luna and keep the playstyle of both weapons alive, without being too much for the game balance-wise. I'm really not sure if we're going to see every weapon come back in the next game. There is a sizable amount of them, but I personally hope that like 90% of the stuff in the game does come back main weapon-wise, and I still have a good bit of the specials I'd want to return. Did a whole video on it here if you want to see. Finally, an idea brought up a lot from Tricolor is having another mode of play. I know I just talked about 5v5, but that would be the main mode of the game. Tricolor tried a 2v4v2, but the 2v2 are kind of on the same team, and I mean, it's okay, but it didn't really work out. The main ideas I see here are either a 2v2v2v2 or a 3v3v3 mode, as well as possibly free-for-all, but that has some color issues in terms of having to separate people. Whether it's a limited time mode or not, I think it would be really interesting to see more teams and more dynamics between them. Like I talked about with 5v5, having smaller teams could increase the amount of carry potential as well as have a bit more interesting ideas. If you play the game more often as a duo or a trio, it would also give you something to do. I think 3v3v3 is the harder one to balance. Building maps in a way that doesn't have two teams ganging up on one other team is a little bit tricky to do, and I think 2v2v2v2 is the more interesting idea. It lends itself more to modes like deathmatch rather than objective, and you can have more symmetrical stage ideas with teams being on four corners of the map. I also just personally think it could be very interesting to see what the game could look like with that. And if we're going to have a contrast to a mode that's more team-based with 4v4 or potentially 5v5, I also just think a mode with smaller teams but more of them would naturally balance out the larger teams of the base gameplay, which could potentially help a lot of people who don't like to play team-based shooters give Splatoon more of a try, especially if it's 2v2v2v2. I'm glad I don't have to say that anymore. But that's all I have time for today. Which one of these ideas do you want to see in Splatoon 4? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time.